Harris this morning. Sure. The latest FNC poll, meanwhile, highlights Americans' growing concern over terrorism, with the issue rating higher than the economy and immigration. Joining us right now is former Homeland Security and Counterterrorism Advisor under President George W. Bush, Fran Townsend. Fran, good to see you.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for joining us. No surprise that terrorism is right up there among the most important. When you look at the field of candidates, who do you think is best to address that issue?
Well, you know what? Look, what the American people want is to be reassured, right? We've looked at the polls. Americans are not reassured by President Obama's approach to Syria, to ISIS, and that's what they're going to look for. They're going to look for somebody who can give them a plan that they have confidence in will protect them here at home. Part of that is, we have to admit, this Iraq-first strategy against ISIS hasn't worked. It's frankly failed. And so given what we've seen in the Paris attacks, the President, the United States, and our allies are going to have to switch to a Syria-first policy because, of course, the threat, the terrorism threat for us here at home and to Western Europe is emanating out of Syria now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Fran, do you think that somebody needs to be as polarizing as Trump has been on saying, hey, look, bomb the hell out of them, or somebody needs to come in now and give specificity?
I think specificity is, look, facts are what persuade people, right? They want to know, what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. So, look, I think you need to say it's a Syria first. I think what you want to do is specifically look at that border between Iraq and Syria. You want to divide ISIS so you isolate them, and they've got to take you on separately in the both places. You need to increase your airstrikes. You need to loosen the rules of engagement for troops. You need more than 50 special operators. You need Arab troops. You need a safe zone so you stem the flow of refugees here to the United States and to Western Europe. There's a number of things, and a candidate needs to be very specific about what steps they're going to take.
Friend, why haven't we gone into Syria? Why have we had this Iraq-first situation? I mean, it doesn't make sense if we know their borders and where the caliphate is, and we know Raqqa is their headquarters, within their own supposed state. Why haven't we gone there? What is its reluctance?
It's a mystery.
Well, it's
exactly the question. Yeah. It's a mystery.
It's a little hard for me to defend this, right? But I would say to you, I think what the administration would say is we've had an air campaign. I would say to you, an air campaign alone is not enough. You need air controllers, Americans who can spot and call in bombing strikes, and you can't just
Aren't we missing our targets with these air campaigns?
You know, it's interesting because I was in the region not 2 weeks ago, and you hear from our Arab allies a good deal of frustration about there are these bombing runs, and American pilots come back with the majority of their ordnance on board because they lack the intelligence to hit targets.
Right, and that's evidence. The U.S. and the allies hit 283 Islamic State vehicles in an oil facility, but we misjudged how much revenue ISIS was getting from its oil. We talk about striking at the heart of the ISIS economy, which it is now. It's a self-sustaining economy. But we thought that we underestimated by, I think, $400 million a year in just oil revenue, and we were hitting refineries when ISIS had moved away from refining oil and was just selling the raw crude.
That's right. And when I say we need to loosen the rules of engagement, what you hear from the American military and the pilots in particular is that they weren't allowed earlier to hit these convoys of oil.
Right.
Because there was concern about collateral damage. We need to make some judgments here about what's important and what our priorities are. And I think you see now a beginning of the loosening of those rules of engagement because we are hitting the convoys.
How about the economic weapons of war? I mean, look, the Saudis today come out and say, hey, look, we don't want oil prices to go down any further. To Dagen's point, that's actually probably a good headline for ISIS. How do we just step up and say to the Saudis, why don't you let oil go down to 30 or 25? Why don't we strengthen the dollar and deflate their debts?
I'll tell you, in my experience during my time at the White House, the Saudis are not exactly real open to us suggesting what they ought to do with the prices of oil. There's a lot of times in our economy we would like to have some influence there. They're not exactly,
In times of war, I mean, if we declare war, this should absolutely be on the table, should it not?
Absolutely.
There was a headline earlier that said Saudi Arabia now is open to cooperating with OPEC. And so this is the first time we're hearing this for a long time because, of course, they were unwilling to stop production to lift prices earlier in the year. That's where that comes from.
And where are our Arab allies in the region? Why aren't they helping attack and give that intelligence that we need and actually help us go into Syria? I mean, where have they been?
So, in fairness, in terms of counterterrorism, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, you've got some of your best allies. I mean, it was the Saudi intelligence that stopped the cartridge bombs and stopped a suicide at an AQAP. And so we need you're quite right, we need their help on intelligence. But I will tell you, I think think they were frustrated. They want to see Assad go. They want that to be a key part of the policy. And because it wasn't, they pulled. They're not doing airstrikes, the Emirates and Saudis, anymore in Syria because they pulled out in order to focus on Yemen.
We don't have a clear, defined strategy.
That, and they wanted to focus on Yemen, of course, with the Iranians on their southern border.
I think that's right, though. I mean, our friends in the Middle East do not trust the strategy, do not feel like the U.S. has a strategy, so they're running from us.
That's right.
Into Putin's arms.
Well, and they also feel as though they were they will never forgive us over abandoning Mubarak.
That's right.
And they feel
that was the first.
That's the first
mistake.
one.
Second mistake was the red line.
Right. And then you've got the Iranian deal. And so our Sunni Arab partners really feel very much abandoned by U.S. foreign policy.
Totally agree. Fran, thank you very much for your insights. So
Thanks,
good
Marie.
to see you. Appreciate it very much. Fran Townsend. Coming